Hello, I'm State Representative Henry Yanez. Welcome to the State of Your State, my public affairs show that brings the people of Macomb County news from our state capital. As we move towards spring, we also move closer to road construction season. Soon we'll be seeing orange barrels along with MDOT and road construction employees hard at work repairing and maintaining our roads. The Michigan Department of Transportation has jurisdiction over 9,660 route miles of state road and 32,047 lane miles, 4,750 highway, railroad, and pedestrian bridges, 665 miles of state-owned railroad, and 4 state-owned airports. My guest today is Jeff Cranson, the Communications Director for MDOT, and he's here to tell us how MDOT takes care of the roads we use every day. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Oh, great. Thank you for being here. So, Jeff, can you just tell us a little bit about MDOT and a little bit about the size of the department and how many employees?
Sure. The department is right around 2,500 employees, which is actually less than half of where it was at its peak in the early 70s. For lots of reasons, technology chief among them. There's a lot of things that you can do now, for less money. So I think the department has made a lot of efforts to get more efficient. Despite the incredible, lack of investment, as you know, the ongoing problems with transportation in Michigan at all levels, not just at the state level, but at the local level and the county level, MDOT has managed to maintain the system they have with fewer employees. And, it's been a challenge, but I would never want anybody to think that investment is about hiring more people, because it's not. It's about fixing the roads and putting private people to work. So when you mentioned in your intro seeing those MDOT workers, you're not going to see very many MDOT people at the side of the road when you're doing those construction projects. Those are private firms, and those are private industry employing your sons and daughters and sisters and brothers out there in hard hats doing the real work. So
excellent. We're going to talk a little bit about that as far as private workers building a roads contracts going out. But first, let me just ask you right off the bat, are Michigan roads worse than the surrounding states?
They are underinvested in compared to the surrounding states. Every state around us, every state in the Great Lakes region, and actually by many accounts every state in the country invests more per capita, more per person than Michigan does, and that's only because it's been so long since we raised that level of investment. So Ohio, for instance, which you hear compared a lot, invests $1 billion more per year. Similar size system, slightly larger population, but not that far off of what Michigan has. And they spend $1 billion more a year. I mean, they get $300 million a year alone in toll revenue from the turnpike. And they recently, Ohio's an interesting example because the governor just recently signed a $7 billion investment. That's over several years. But they made a decision to go ahead, and some of that is bonding against the turnpike for future revenues. But they've decided, our infrastructure is important and we've got to shore up our foundation. Very similar geography, topography, similar challenges they have. They use the same specs, same materials, same specifications from the Federal Highway Administration that Michigan has. So it's not about them using better materials or about them having better workmanship or better contractors. It's all about how much you invest in getting what you pay for.
So you're saying it's really about commitment to the priority of investment?
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's like anything. Think of roads as a public utility. Natural gas rates, electricity rates have doubled or nearly doubled in both those instances since 1997, while we haven't invested in anything more in roads. Now imagine if the meter was running every time you use the road and you thought of it that way. What else costs the same thing now that it did in 1997?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about cost. How much does it cost to reconstruct or repair? Because I think there's a difference, right, between repairing versus actually reconstructing.
There is.
What would be the cost?
The average it's tough because everything depends on, again, geography, topography, where you're doing this. But they estimate $1 million to $1.6 million per mile, basically, for a reconstruction, for a complete rebuild. And you're right, you raise a very insightful point that we're not talking about rebuilding things these last several years in Michigan because of our lack of investment. That's why we have a very aggressive asset management program, as do many counties and cities, that figure out the best way to make the roads last longer. That's why you'll see crews out. It seems like, gosh, they were just working on this road. Well, they were. They were just out there sealing cracks and doing some kind of surface work that would, think of it like your tooth. Sooner or later, you need a crown, right? But in the meantime, you try to keep it going as best you can. But a lot of these roads in Michigan are at that point where we're going to need complete rebuilds, complete reconstruction. I-94 through Detroit, I-75, some of our oldest freeways, some of the oldest freeways in the country, are due for some major rebuilds, and that goes for the bridges too. So.
Yeah, and when we do those major rebuilds, it really causes a lot of problems with traffic, people trying to get to work, and lanes being shut down, and traffic being delayed. How many roads can actually be under construction at one time?
Well, I don't know that there is a maximum, but they definitely try to coordinate with the local agencies and make sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And I'm sure you've seen instances where you're thinking, my gosh,
Yes.
I-94 is closed, and so is my favorite detour. Didn't they talk to each other? But I think again, because of technology, the department does a lot better job than it has historically, I think, and the county road commissions are technologically savvy, and so are the cities, and so they coordinate on these things. But going to that point about delays and what construction can mean to delays, MDOT was a pioneer in something called user delay costs, actually coming up with a formula for how much time you and I, because time is money, how much time do we lose sitting in traffic when there's a construction project going on? And that's built into a lot of the contracts for these contractors, that they've got to expedite and get this done. And so they're trying to do that work under that pressure of knowing that if they go longer, it's going to cost them more, they're not going to make as much. And safety is of course the top priority always, but also paramount is delays and keeping users moving. I mean, that's why one of the big innovations that Michigan has taken on, and they did 2 of them last year in West Michigan, and you'll see more of these, it's called the bridge slide, where they build a bridge in place right next to an existing bridge so traffic can be moving that whole time, and then it's only shut down instead of maybe 3 months for about 2 days over a weekend, where they actually slide the new bridge into place. They take the other one out, slide it in. Costs more, but hardly has any traffic delays at all. Most people will say, if you ask for a show of hands, if you're a business person with a truck on the road, or if you're a commuter, will you trade that, to not be delayed? And everybody says, well, of course I will. So there's a lot of things like that going on, even in these, financially challenging times, to create innovations to keep people moving.
And absolutely, keeping people moving, as you said, time is money, and it's incredibly important. But as you've experienced yourself in your own car, that orange barrel season can be quite frustrating. So it's good to hear that that MDOT has a thought and a plan to help keep that traffic moving. You said at the very beginning, though, that a lot of the road construction is done by private contractors. And one of the complaints I hear all the time from people back home is that that we don't have warranties for our road, or our roads tend to break up right after they've gotten fixed. So tell me a little bit about the warranty program that MDOT has, and what's involved in a warranty, costs associated with it. How does that work?
Well, MDOT was a national leader, again a pioneer, because of legislation. The legislature at the time in the 90s decided this was something they wanted to do, and they passed laws in 1997 requiring warranties on most of the major projects that MDOT does. So part of that is that's a great thing from a public relations standpoint, to say that we're going to do these warranties and we're going to make the contractors stand by them and get real aggressive about putting them on every project. But it does create an extra challenge and an extra work for the engineers that have to inspect these and monitor them, because there's a lot of work involved in enforcing it. It's not as simple as you go out and you see this road and you see something breaking up and you're like, the contractor did a shoddy job, get them back out here. It could be for something that was out of their control. It could be because of design. I mean, it could have been that MDOT's designers didn't know something about the soil or the pavement underneath. I mean, there's lots of reasons why that could happen. So getting that warranty fulfilled, getting the contractor to come back out, takes some work, takes some negotiation. Recently, we've been told by the Office of Auditor General that we need to do a better job on that enforcement. They praised us for being so aggressive about implementing these warranties, but said you've got to do a better job about doing it. And we're happy to do that. But it's really unfortunate that out of this has come some mindset that Michigan's contracting industry is trying to get away with something, because they're held to national standards. Like I said, the Federal Highway Administration determines what materials go into this and how these things are built. And these are real people that are building these roads. So certainly they want to stand behind their product, and MDOT wants to be sure that we do that. There's a lot of challenges, and the legislation in Proposal 1 on the ballot in May would require that warranties for the first time extend to the locals too. So counties and cities doing any projects for more than $1 million would also have to have warranties. Right now, It's only an MDOT thing. So 9,700 miles of the state's 120,000 miles of roads. So this will extend warranties into other projects and, call for that kind of enforcement and that kind of accountability. So I don't want to discount the problems that we've had with enforcement, but I think that there's a lot of things in place now with technology, a lot of new things in place to do a better job of monitoring those and making sure we follow up and that the work is done when something doesn't hold up as long as it should have.
So is there a plan then to increase enforcement? How do we hold the contractors' feet to the fire? First of all, is there anything like bonding or how?
They pay a surety bond.
They do pay a surety
They
bond.
do
Okay.
pay, and we do not know how much that is. That's proprietary information. They build that into their bid, but they don't break it out, and they don't have to, and that's understandable. They don't want to say that we're doing this kind of work and we're banking on it lasting this long, because that would give their competitors information they don't want to give up. So, but they're all required. The surety bond is not paid off until the warranty runs out and the work is deemed to have been effective. So the challenge for MDOT has been doing those inspections on time, not letting a warranty expire before you went out and said, hey, this, the warranty is about to expire, this doesn't look like it's holding up. A lot of times the work is pretty minor. It's just like crack sealing, because water's getting in, which is what does the most damage to pavement. It's why you start to see, everybody thinks the freeze-thaw has a lot to do with potholes. It does, but it's not until the rains come that you really start to see pothole season, when the water makes its way into the pavement. So it's the same with a lot of those projects. And so the crack sealing is often the corrective action that's required. They have to get out there and do that. But again, you have to decide in those cases too, is this worth doing right now when we see that this work needs to be done, but it's also going to tie up traffic and you're going to be out there sealing cracks on a busy road? So is that worth it? It's maybe a $10,000 job, but it's going to cause a lane to be closed for a few days. So you have to weigh all those things. Yeah. And so sometimes it looks like, a warranty lapsed, but maybe we actually knew about it and decided we're going to let it go just to keep traffic moving. Those are the kinds of decisions you have to make.
And is that all done by MDOT employees, or do you hire a contractor or third party to verify?
In some cases, there are some consultants that do that inspection. Largely, it's done by MDOT inspectors, but there are some that do that too. Obviously, you don't want the contractor who built the road doing the inspection themselves.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about asset management, which is absolutely critical to maintaining our roads, maintaining the quality of our roads. Out of that asset management, though, how frequent are the repairs for the roads going back to warranties?
I guess that varies across the board, but I don't think that it's. I mean, when you consider, the billions of dollars in projects done over the years, the portion of that actually requires corrective action is actually pretty small. But I can't give you an exact figure.
And out of the private contractors that are building these roads, are any of them out of state, or do we do Michigan first, or how do we decide?
It's a low bid process.
Strictly low bid process.
That's the way it is. But we have many big and good and small, actually all size contractors in Michigan. I mean, they took, this lack of investment has forced some out of business and forced them to leave or try to do business in other parts of the country, where things are growing, or where, the Sun Belt, for instance. But, we have a robust and still, I think, very good contracting industry in Michigan.
That's fantastic. So, let's talk a little bit about getting some information to the taxpayer. Again, we've been hearing a lot because of Proposal 1. We've been hearing a lot about roads from the taxpayers. If a guy sitting at home wants to know more about our roads, how does he find out?
Well, our website is full of information. If you go to michigan.gov/MDOT, you can find just about everything there. There's a tab for everything from how roads are funded to how they're built to what kind of materials are used to our rail program, our transit programs, our aeronautics programs. I mean, the website is chock full of information, and I think, highly navigable. There's a lot of information there, so, no website can be probably as user-friendly as we'd like it to be, but I feel like...
You have an app as well?
We do have an app.
And you're also on Twitter, so if there's a road closure or some work going on...
Very aggressive Twitter feeds in every region, yes.
Yeah. So if anybody really wants to know what's going on the road, as long as they're connected, they can find out the information.
Yes, absolutely.
And in real time.
My Drive, the app, My Drive. You can download that for your on an Android platform or an Apple platform. Is an excellent app for real-time traffic information. You can see cameras, you can see everything you want to know.
So I have to admit that I have the app on my iPhone, but I rarely go to it because I'm just not trained to do that. I think I'm at that age where I enjoy the technology, but I still fall back into some of the older methods.
Well, and of course you don't want to use it while you're driving, especially given your background.
Yes, we don't want to use it while we're driving, that's for sure. Thanks, Jeff, and hold that thought for a second. We're going to take a short break here, and we're going to be back shortly with more with Jeff Cranson and the Michigan Department of Transportation, talking roads and infrastructure right here on the State of Your State.
Say with me, imagine what you'd see if every child had a book to read. 'Cause every kid across the nation deserves a book to read, and we can make it happen right now. No, I don't know what you've been told, but kids with books learn so much more. So the mission is for us to get a book to each and every child. So let's join hands, book people unite, unearth hidden passion. To motivate some magic, to change the writing on the wall, writing on the wall. One book can make a difference. One book can inspire a child. One book can be the first thing that helps to change a life.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
NFC, AFC, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and cornerbacks are all living united to ensure the academic success of millions of kids in our communities all the way to graduation day. But that won't happen without you. So take the pledge at unitedway.org. Make a difference in the life of a child. Suit up like your favorite NFL players and become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor with United Way.
Hi and welcome back. I'm State Representative Henry Yanez, and I'm here today with Jeff Cranson from MDOT. Thank you and again for coming on to State of Your State,
Sure,
my cable access show. Jeff, we were talking about roads and MDOT and how the road system is funded and warranties, and there's a lot of great information that you gave us in the first half. But can you tell us a little bit about how it's determined where the money goes throughout the state to fix our roads?
So under the formula that was developed in 1951 and has been revised since then, but it's called Act 51, the state gets 39% of the money for roads. The counties get another 39%, and then the remaining 22% goes to cities and villages. That's the breakdown. That's how it's always been. Now within that, there's obviously decisions that are made about traffic volumes and population and things like that. But I can tell you that nobody feels like they're getting their fair share right now, and that's because the federal government hasn't increased the federal gas tax since 1993, and the state hasn't done anything since 1997. So that curve that you've seen on pavement condition, I mean, you think about it, when you hear about potholes, I mean, certainly there are potholes on some state routes and some state trunk lines, but you notice it mostly in the urban areas, right? It's in the cities. It's in the busy streets in the cities, whether it's Sterling Heights or Warren or Detroit or Grand Rapids or Kalamazoo or Lansing. That's where that pavement damage is really acute, and that lack of investment hurts them, and that's why cities have had to take it on themselves. I mean, the city of Grand Rapids passed an income tax extension last May, to pay for roads because they said we can't wait for the state and we can't wait for the federal government. So yeah, it's going to be a huge ongoing issue, and I think there's always going to be a perception that we don't get enough, but there are there's good science and good formulas and data on which those decisions are based.
Yeah, and certainly my city of Sterling Heights a couple years ago actually passed a road millage. to help fix our local roads. So you're saying we haven't really had any updates for the state in 1997, for the federal government in 1993, and I believe Public Act 51 was established in 1951?
That's correct. That's correct.
So we have some updating to do to help get our roads back up to where they need to be.
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at, but it starts with that investment. I mean,
And speaking of how things need to be, can you tell us a little bit about how we grade a road? How do we determine what's a good road? How do you grade roads? Do you use a color system, a number system, or what?
no, they actually have some pretty sophisticated, technology things that they take out to what's called the Pazer system, where they go over the pavement and get a calculation on the ride and the smoothness of the ride, and then they also factor that into how old it is and maybe when it was last rebuilt and those things. But they have some pretty sophisticated ways to determine the quality of the pavement and what it is. And you probably saw the most recent Transportation Asset Management Council report, which is a very ecumenical agency, brings together officials from cities, counties, the state. It's not dominated by any one agency, that said that we're at a point where more of our roads are in poor condition than they've ever been, and that curve is only going to continue to decline.
And my understanding is, as sophisticated as that is, our roads are simply graded as good, fair, or bad.
Poor, yeah.
Or poor. Good,
Yeah.
fair, or poor.
That's right.
So, do you know the percentages of our roads in the state that are good?
Well,
fair,
on the state trunk line system,
state
we're
trunk
still
line.
in the low 80s to 85% good or fair. That's changing rapidly. There was a goal back after the last fuel tax increase and the bonding that they did on that to get to 90, and they got there in the early 2000s and kind of peaked, and it's been going down. It was staying in that range just kind of steadily, but in these last few years it's starting to fall fast, and it's going to continue to fall fast without more investment. Overall, though, you're talking in the high 30 percentages of poor roads on the entire system when you bring in the locals too. So.
And Jeff, can you talk a little bit, because one of the other things I get back home all the time is the weight of the trucks, the heavy trucks. Can you talk a little bit about the impact, whether the trucks actually have an impact or not on the quality of our roads?
That is a really misunderstood issue in Michigan. Michigan went to a per axle loading standard. First of all, you're talking about 5% of the trucks that are actually in that really heavy zone of over 80,000 pounds, and about 2% that get permitted at the 160,000 pound rate. But that weight is spread over axles in Michigan. Think about it like when you walk on the ice and you hear a crack. What were you taught to do as a kid? Lay down, right? Disperse your weight. So that's what we've decided to do, and there's good science behind that. And as it turns out, people that study this on a national level have recommended the Federal Highway Administration, and the Federal Highway Administration is considering possibly recommending that other states adopt Michigan's truck weight standard. So this idea that we should, go for those lower levels and actually put more trucks on the road, require smaller trailers, which means more tractors, which creates more congestion, more emissions, creates a safety issue. I think what Michigan is doing is pioneering, and is going to turn out to be something that others are looking at. But there are some good historical reasons from a business standpoint why Michigan, allowed heavier trucks to begin with. You think about our biggest industries, where you're hauling steel, you're hauling agricultural products, you're hauling timber, logs. Those are big job providers and pretty important to Michigan's economy.
No doubt about that.
And on that point too, you'll hear people say, my street is falling apart. It must be because of heavy trucks. Well, when's the last time you saw a truck in your subdivision?
It's been a while since I saw a steel hauler in front of my condo.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeff. So let's talk a little bit about back home, a lot of potholes. And you talked about some of the technology about how you determine the quality of a road. So who actually detects or finds the potholes? And when a citizen finds a pothole, how should they report it?
Well, there's a lot of, you can go on the website and there's numbers that you can call for MDOT if it's on a state trunk line. You can use that MyDry app we mentioned earlier. There's a report a pothole feature there. Most of the local communities have a number that you can call, have a way, especially the cities. Many of them also have apps where you can report it. But it is not hard with a pretty quick web search to find out who your agency is. You know what road you're on, what local street or state route, and report it and get action pretty quickly. But most of them are discovered by the maintenance people that just kind of know that when the season comes, this is where they're going to be, and they're already on patrol and ready to go after them.
Yeah, certainly when I worked for the fire department in Sterling Heights, when we hit a pothole in the fire truck, we were on the phone pretty quick to make sure they came and fixed it.
Absolutely.
In cities like Sterling Heights and Warren, where I represent, we have a lot of businesses, and those businesses are really impacted sometimes by road construction. So does MDOT have any funds for businesses that are impacted by road construction? How do you work with the businesses that
Well,
are impacted?
they work with them very closely to try to maintain access, obviously, during projects and do whatever they can. Second only to safety is business and what we can do to be helpful along those lines. So those guys at the local level, the relationships and the outreach ahead of time on projects and working with them is very important. There's some really creative things that can be done. But in the end, there's no doubt that sometimes, your business is going to have an impact when there's a project going on, but hopefully it does a lot better when it's got a nice smooth road and some of the improvements that are made around it.
And we're getting close to the end of our time here, Jeff. But I did want to touch very quickly on Proposal 1. As you'd mentioned, it's been a long time since we've updated our taxes, our laws. When you look at how we're doing things now versus how we need to do them, can you tell us a little bit about some of the changes that Proposal 1 will bring if it's enacted?
Yeah, we have to invest more somehow, and what this would do under this plan, there were many plans floated. Under this plan, you get the sales tax off fuel. Most people don't know that what they pay at the pump doesn't go entirely to roads. That 6% that you pay on every gallon goes to schools and cities and a little bit to transit. Now that's great for schools and cities, but we think that what we pay at the pump should go to roads. We think that we set up a user fee system. So in its simplest terms, Proposal 1 once and for all fixes that. So every penny you pay at the pump goes to roads. But because that money's taken away, from the sales tax on fuel, it has to be compensated for somehow, and that's where the general sales tax increase from 6 to 7% comes in. That provides that money that backfills the school aid fund and the revenue sharing. So, that's in simplest terms, that's what it is. I know everybody likes to say how complicated it is, and it's tough to unwind years of complicated public policy that got stacked on top of each other and got us to here. But in simplest terms, what you pay at the pump will now go to roads.
And certainly, that's something that we have to update. Technology is changing. We're driving lighter cars, more fuel-efficient cars. We're
Absolutely.
buying less fuel,
Yep.
which means there's less revenue that's coming from a fuel tax. So can you give us an idea? There must be a thought within MDOT about the future. What does the future hold for Michigan roads? How MDOT is going to approach their job of fixing and building roads? What's the future for MDOT?
The future would depend in part on the proposal passing and where you've got your fuel tax tied to inflation, so it can rise a little bit with inflation. Some states are experimenting with vehicle miles traveled. Oregon has had some success with that, where you actually pay based on the miles you travel. Tolling is a pure user fee system. So the gas tax, you're right, it's a user fee, but long term, it's diminishing returns because we do drive more efficiently, which is a great thing for the environment. But your Prius does as much damage as a Hummer. So is it fair that one pays much more than the other for the road? So long term, the department's going to be involved in that kind of thing. Lots of technology advances. We're really involved in the autonomous vehicle technology and what's going on with that. You'll see the connected corridor with some experiments on infrastructure talking to cars talking to cars in Metro Detroit. That's going to be the first to pilot that kind of thing. But yeah, lots of cool technological innovations on the horizon. Our director, Kirk Steidel, is very committed to being on the leading edge of those kinds of things.
And even though we talked mainly about roads during our time here, you're still also dealing with railroads, ports, anything to do with transportation. I think that's one of the things that gets left out of this Proposal 1 conversation is we're talking about roads, but we're really talking about transportation.
Absolutely, and it is a Department of Transportation, not a Department of Highways. And
Absolutely.
Multimodal is more important than ever to future generations who are saying, I want to get around in other ways. So.
Yeah. Jeff, I cannot tell you how much I really appreciate you appearing with me today on our very first show, the State of Your State. Thank you so much for coming
you're
on
welcome.
today. I
Happy
really
to do it.
appreciate all the information. And I want to thank you for joining us today for the very first episode of This is the State of Your State. I'm State Representative Henry Yanez. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.